This is the Balanced Advisor Podcast with Dr. Travis Perry, helping financial advisors like you achieve balance in their lives.
Welcome to another episode of the Balanced Advisor Podcast. I am your host, Dr. Travis Perry. Today, we have a very special guest, Mr. Walter Storholt. He's the co-owner of Third Wheel Media, former play-by-play sportscaster for University of North Carolina Tar Heels women's basketball. And interesting nugget, he lost 100 pounds in the second half of 2021. Welcome, Walter, to the show.
Yeah, great to be with you, Travis. Thanks for having me.
You're going to have to start off with your story of losing 100 pounds in the second half of 2021. You got to start there.
It'll probably lead us to, we can tie back into that pretty easily to talk about balance and a balanced life and some of those kinds of things. But I struggled with my weight a lot through the last several years, the last decade. Injuries mostly kind of broke my ankle. That led to several pounds. And then, college sort of just in general led to some extra pounds, broken ankle, torn ACL, meniscus. And then, just like with each injury, you just keep adding more weight and then can't take it off and that sort of thing. So I finally had enough is enough in 2021. After then, I count the pandemic as an injury, right? So it's sort of a mental injury, if you will. So then there was another jump up during the pandemic. And so enough was enough last summer. And I got to work and hired a local health coach in our area here in the Raleigh, North Carolina region. And I totally changed and shifted all of my priorities in life and just made that number one. And I said, I'll go to balance at some point to go back to maintaining, but I'm going to make this the most important thing in life. And it's amazing what happens to you when you make something the most important thing in your life. And so very quickly, I started to lose weight right off the bat, was incredibly committed to it. Didn't lose really haven't hit any major bumps in the road along the way in terms of, rebounding 20 pounds. It was a very consistent drop all the way through. And so, hit the 100, I started in June of 2021 and hit the 100-pound loss mark right around Christmas or New Year's, like right around that beginning of the year. And then have continued with another 10 to 15 since then, and probably got another 15 or 20 to go at this point. But getting there, and it's been a great journey. The energy level is off the charts compared to where I was, 8-9 months ago at this point.
Wow. I normally don't just get right into it right at the top of the show. We tend to talk about, industry, how you got here, but this is so fascinating what your story is on this. And obviously, full disclosure, Walter and his company, Third Wheel Media, actually produced this show. They produce the Balanced Advisor podcast, and they've been incredible. And we'll talk to you guys more about how they do this and how they can help you with your balance and your scaling of your own, advisor business. But
make me sound good, Dan and Greg. Yeah. They're probably this.
No, you do sound good. And the thing is, as you're talking about, losing weight, like I'm still imagining girls bouncing the basketball down the court, and you're talking about rebounding and getting back in the game. I'm like, man, you're still an announcer. You're still a sportscaster. I love it.
I definitely still have that gene a little bit. So when I was a little kid playing sports, I often liked to play the goalie in as many sports as possible. And it was because you didn't get a lot of action in kids sports being the goalie. So it gave me lots of time to broadcast the game, sitting back being the goalie. I think I had several goals scored on me because I was so caught up in my head of announcing the game that all of a sudden it was like, oh, shoot, they're shooting at me. Let me get ready. They already scored. Oops. All right. Well, I'll get the next one. But somehow I always, at the end of the game during the post-game show in my head, would somehow still, even though we lost 15-1, would somehow still be the MVP of the game. And I never knew how the broadcaster in my head twisted to make that happen. But
I love this. This is so funny. I didn't play goalie at all, like ever. I was always like forward or just, center half, like wanted to be the center of all of the action. So that's super funny. I could see that, like, if you're on a winning team and your team's always, keeping the ball away from the goalie, like what else do you have?
Yeah.
What else are you doing?
Especially in like kids soccer.
Yeah. Kids soccer. Yeah. Professional.
It's all the way at the other end
totally,
for minutes at a time, right. Very extended.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you weren't always a sportscaster for your soccer team, or for North Carolina. But tell us, how did you end up going from sportscaster to co-owner of the Third Wheel Media?
So essentially worked in, news and sports for a really long time. So I actually started in radio when I was 16 years old at the local radio station, getting cups of coffee for the guys on the morning show, greeting guests. I learned how to edit from a guy named Shane Willis at the local radio station, and just watched him for hours at a time, how he edited commercials, shows, kind of everything I could witness him doing. And then I even learned how to do like news updates and sports updates. I started doing live call-ins for the local radio station. The local high school football team let me get involved and start broadcasting games, initially as a stringer, calling in from another game of the week into the main game, and then eventually took over play-by-play duties. And then when I went to college, I moved into my dorm, and then literally I went to work. Like I said, bye to mom and dad, had moved into my dorm, and then I drove to broadcast a game for the news station that I was working for in Chapel Hill at UNC. And so, it's just sort of been something that's always been in my blood ever since I first started in radio at 16 years old. It was my first job, was in radio, and kind of haven't really stopped in that media world. And went through college, got a job doing local news and sports reporting at that same station. And then developed a good relationship with John Stillman, who was a few years ahead of me at UNC. And he was more in the sales side, although also in the broadcasting. And I mean, when you work in a small station, you kind of serve a lot of different roles. So I was news director, sports director, but could also write and produce commercials, host a show, interview people, be interviewed, provide your opinion on something, go to a board of aldermen meeting, and then pop right back over to do sports and training an intern, and, handling lots of different roles. And that's how you also work, 80 and 90 hour weeks. For very little pay, which is, again, we could circle back to talking about balance, kind of learning lessons from those early days of working in the industry. But that's where I met John, who has much more of a sales bone. And he was more onto the selling side, advertising at the radio station. He ended up working for a financial advisor after his time at the radio station, and helped them start to do radio shows, and then also learned how to be an advisor when he was interviewing a whole bunch of people on how to be, how to host their shows and that sort of thing in the early days of kind of financial advisor radio. And he was like, I think I can become an advisor, because he started answering questions for all of these different advisors that would, come on. And he was like, if they can do this, I can do this. And so he started his own practice, and then we kind of merged in our media experiences and started podcasting. And then that led back into still doing some radio stuff, but that's where the growth of our business has been over the last several years. And so I got into the financial business, that way through interviewing people and, just kind of getting plugged into the industry that way. But then it was neat because I kind of wanted to learn more about the back end, because I kind of like numbers and finance and business sides of things too. So I went and got my insurance license to see what that was, all about. And then dabbled in getting my Series 65, but kind of made the decision that I wanted to stick more to the media side and not become an advisor myself. And so I studied for the Series 65, but didn't actually go through with, trying to take it and that sort of thing. But it helped give me kind of some perspective more, into like different elements of the business and different sides of it, and put me in the shoes of an advisor ever so slightly. And I've sat in on appointments with John, with clients that he's met over the years. And so it's been neat to see how he interacts with folks and kind of what goes into the planning process. And he's taught me all about, his spreadsheets and his planning process and things like that. So it's been fun to kind of get to know people in that realm a little bit more. And we brought in, when we first started the company, it was actually with another guy. He was the third wheel. So John and I were like longtime friends, and we brought in this third guy who we didn't know very well at the time, but he was actually the driving force to kind of help us like start the company and take the leap. And then like one day after we filed paperwork to officially begin the business, he disappeared and was like, I don't want to be involved. I changed my mind, and like wrote him out of the company.
The third wheel left.
The third wheel left, just like right off the bat. And so we knew Mark Killian, who is now the third wheel. We like to jokingly call him. I don't think he likes that very much when I call him the third wheel, but it's kind of is what it is. He replaced the original third wheel.
Right. So Mark, he would actually be the fourth wheel.
I guess
if the third wheel didn't fall off, like he would have been the fourth wheel.
Now
you can throw that back at him.
We need to buy a trailer now, and that can be the fifth wheel, and we can do
too many
mobile
dad
podcasting.
Jokes. There's too many dad jokes. I love it.
We either just like made all of our listeners really happy, or we just lost everybody right there. But no, we brought Mark, and Mark is like the video guru and is incredibly personable and easy to talk to. I would say by far he's the favorite co-host of anybody that we work with. I mean, personalities connect with different people, so there's folks who will interview with you and they love you, and then they interview the next person, like, oh, actually, no, this guy was much more fun to talk to, and we click really well. Well, everybody seems to click with Mark, so he's the musician, he's the cool guy, so he fits appropriately as a third wheel, as the cool guy out there. So
I love that. So, I mean, but you guys, did you start off just offering services for the financial industry because John was there, or was it kind of everybody? Like, how did you get to
started in the financial industry for sure.
Yeah,
and then we've grown from there to work with other business professionals as well. So we've worked with different real estate agents over the years, and we have a turnkey podcasting and radio platform on the real estate side. The financial advisory has just, that side of the business has grown very quickly. We developed good relationships with like IMOs and FMOs out there, but we maintained independence. That was something that was really important to us. So we've tried to avoid, super exclusive deals where we can only work with kind of that one parent company or one partnership out there, and just try to have good relationships with all of the different players in the financial industry. And that's always kind of been our philosophy on things. Like even in a direct client to client relationship, like, we don't really require any contracts with the folks that we work with. And one of the reasons is we like to be straightforward with people, straight shooters. And we want you working with us because you want to work with us. And if you want to go do your show on your own or take it somewhere else because we're not providing the level of service that you want, then we're not going to try and hold your show hostage or keep you from doing that. And I think that's led to a lot of times when, for various reasons, somebody has to move on to a new company, they come back around and come back for a second stint working with us, or realize, oh man, no, I liked your guys' process really well, and it was just these other circumstances that forced us to have to leave. I think that speaks, volumes about the way that we try to not only structure our business on sort of the big picture scale, but also on a more individual client to client relationship. Yeah, we moved into real estate. We've just recently launched an estate planning podcast turnkey service. So that's kind of a new venture that we're entering into now, which is pretty exciting. And there's some kind of very, easy mesh over from the financial side of things as well. So I look forward to seeing that grow throughout 2022. Yeah. But yeah, finance has always been sort of the bread and butter because of John's experience.
Yeah, his experience. But you guys are still, real estate, estate planning, very much sister, type of, relationship in the industry. If not, some would consider that actually still the same industry.
I also love the fact too, that we have like these other like random things. So we do a Civil War podcast.
Oh, wow.
Of all things, which is actually like a really popular, interesting show. It's more history based, not like a opinion type thing. And then we have a medical show that's like very specific for nurse anesthetists. One of the best shows that we do, in fact. It's actually a financial advisor who does the show, but the show itself is more industry based. So he's trying to kind of be a thought leader in the nurse practitioner or nurse anesthetist space, and kind of like, just trying to make a name for himself there and create visibility. So he works on his niche that way, which is fantastic.
Yeah, well, and we're going to get into this too, because I think this is super important for advisors who are trying to scale and keep their balance. One of the first things I really have them do is like identify the niche and then go super deep. I've got a niche, retirees from, anywhere from 60 to 75. That's not a niche. Like every advisor has client, like nurse anesthetist. I can't even say the word like that.
Right.
Like
or spell it.
Yeah. I tried to spell it, but you never know. But the great thing is like so niche with that, like you're going to be the financial advisor for that industry or for that niche, or what some even call a fractal. What is a fractal? A fractal is like a tiny piece of a niche.
8th grade science class again?
Yeah. Well, it's not that. Like it's not math. It's actually like a piece of a tree, like is what they talk. It's like a little branch is basically what they're saying.
Do you
And I
feel like
learned
it's
that-
more like that now? Like it,
Yeah.
because work with
Totally.
retirees maybe worked, 10, 15 years ago, but now as things have evolved, the world is just going more and more and more niche.
You're exactly right. And Michael Port, I'm taking the heroic public speaking course. It's like a master's level course on how to public speak. And, they rip you apart and edit your paper, and then they have you practice your craft until you're ready to go, and they put you on stage, and then they tear you down and bring you back up. It's a great experience for those who can stomach that.
Is that like 21st century version of what was it my mom took when she was young? Toastmasters?
Yeah, that's right. This is like Toastmasters times 1,000, and with people who actually are knowing what they do. Like, they're professional actors. They know how to perform. But Michael says in his book, like, for speakers to get really fractal famous, that's his thing. Get fractal famous. So your financial advisor who's with these nurse anesthetists, he's fractal famous, likely because of his podcast. So we're gonna talk about more about this. But first, let's jump into balance. Like, let's backtrack a little bit. College, your first jobs, and you're working 80, 90-hour weeks. Financial advisors struggle. I know. I help them every day to keep their balance, but also in scaling. When they want to scale, sometimes they're afraid to scale because they're going to lose that sense of balance if they have it, right? Or it might make their balance even worse if they spend all this time marketing, which is where you guys come into play. You can offset that by, hey, let us produce your show or even co-host your show. Like, there's a lot of things you can do. But let's back up to, what is your definition of balance? Everybody has a different definition. Everybody has a different thought process on this or analogy. Walter, how would you describe balance?
I don't know if I've, if you ask me and gave me, an hour to think about it, my answer might sound slightly different. But off the top of my head, I view balance as freedom. Or freedom as balance. It's maybe a chicken or egg thing, which one kind of comes first. If I have the freedom to, like yesterday is an example. So we're recording this in April, and like Easter Monday was yesterday. My wife, Connie, worked all weekend at the hospital. So Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, we hardly got any time to spend together over the weekend. Difficult balance. And I had a couple of things on Monday that came up where I couldn't really take Monday off because I'd taken Friday off, and we'd had family in town kind of during the week previously, and it was just going to be difficult to take that day off. But you know what? I got some emails done in the morning, knocked out an interview, and then kind of just had the ability to say, you know what? This email and this task and these things I can push to tomorrow. And I can take 4 hours in the afternoon, and we can go do something fun and spend time together. And so we just kind of all of a sudden was able to pull some strings, make that happen, take a couple of days off, a couple of hours off of work, and not really miss a beat. The team kept ticking, everything kept moving freely. And I kind of view that as like, I had the freedom and the balance in place to be able to kind of like make that choice, make that decision, to prioritize. We talk about priorities, like to be able to prioritize something else, even if it's only temporarily, to be able to move your priorities around when you want to and not have them dominate you. That sort of, to me, kind of indicates what that balance looks like. From the like losing weight perspective, it's kind of the same thing. Like, if today after our interview, I'm like, you know what, I don't know if I'm going to have the energy to go get my workout in at 6:00 tonight, but I really want to get a run in today. I have the balance as long as I don't have like an actual interview to go in, I'm not going to cancel on somebody to go then, do the, go work in my run necessarily, but I have the flexibility to be able to say, all right, I'm going to take my lunch break from, 1 to 2 today and go get in that run, and I'll work an hour later, or whatever the case may be. And just the ability to shift those things around, to me, tells me that I'm balanced, because what it used to look like was work was number one all the time. And it'd get to 5, 6, 7 o'clock at night. And unfortunately, I'd all of a sudden be the most productive I'd been all day, whether that was because of procrastination or just because my brain starts working really well at 4, 5, 6, 7 o'clock at night. I don't know necessarily. But that's where I would get kind of stuck in a loop and just feel like you can't take that breath. You don't have that balance in place. And so that's one of the things that, like, shifting those priorities around is what helped lead to more balance over this past year. And I think what will help carry me in more ways in life than just the weight management type stuff, but will help, keep me successful from here and beyond.
Love it. Yeah. You really said this well at the very beginning of the show that, when your health became number one, when it became top priority is what you said.
Yeah.
That changed everything. And the thing is that I think you mentioned after that was, well, I'll get back into balance, but I actually think that is balance. I've come to find with advisors and with pretty much anybody we've interviewed, business owners as well, is that when they know what their top priorities are and they live it, they feel balanced. So for you, if health has always been a priority, but you've put it off, you've been injured, like you didn't just get injured once, like you had a string of injuries, which in and of itself, like we could talk about that, like for the entire podcast, and just break that down. But, no pun intended, Walter, but the fact that you've had all these string of injuries, like that has put you back from being able to then work out and do all these things. And then to make this huge comeback, like this is a balanced story. This is a health story. I find that most advisors who go through the Make Time Method with me just realize they just needed to put the time toward it. Mm-hmm. They just needed to make it a priority. And as soon as it became a priority, then they'd figure it out. Like, oh yeah, now it's time to actually integrate with that health coach. It's time to actually go to the gym. It's time to run that marathon or that triathlon, whatever I've been putting off. But once they put the time toward it, because it's a priority, it works. You also mentioned,
if I can jump in there real fast, you're just spot on because I'm left with this feeling of like, oh my God, why did it take so many years to get back to balance? Like, why did it take so many years to make it that priority? And so I'm trying to learn that lesson for other things in life too, and trying to, bottle up that feeling and keep a hold of it so that if something else in life down the line comes up, you listen to that voice a little bit sooner and be like, all right, fast forward 10 years. Then if you make the good decision, are you going to wish you had done this 10 years earlier? And if so, then go do it now and don't put it off. Don't procrastinate. Go ahead and make those changes in your life now while you're thinking about it. And that's as soon as I started losing weight, like immediately I was like, oh my God, this is not as hard as I've made it out to be. It just took some time and attention and prioritizing it. And the rest just fell into place. I mean, it was still hard. There's still other elements of it that are difficult. I'm not saying it's just easy to just, okay, this is priority and then everything will work easily. That's not necessarily the answer. But I think we all have the tools. We sort of the cliche, you can do anything you set your mind to, but there's truth to it. And so if you make something that priority and you go after it, things will fall into place.
Yep. My dad used to tell me that all the time. Dad, should I do this? Should I do this? And he's like, Trav, you can do whatever you set your mind to. I'm like, that's not helpful. I wanted you to make the decision so that I could say, he was so good. Specific
answer.
Yeah. He was so good at like,
tell me what to do.
In my face. But it's true. And I tell my kids, where there's a will, there's a way. Mm-hmm. If you really decide and you prioritize it, you'll figure it out, or you'll hire someone, or someone will help you, because now your energy and your motion, your momentum is that direction. And it's incredible. Like I've seen this happen when I've wanted to hire someone, or when I've wanted to crack into, a business or write a book. In 2020, I wanted to write this book, Achieving Balance. And I just found that as I was searching, as I was researching, as I was looking, the right situation just showed up right there in front of me. And it allowed me to now be able to teach advisors how to use a book to scale their business. But let's talk about advisors for a second, because this industry, like you kind of dabbled in it. I had no idea you were licensed at one point. I had no idea you tried to do the 65. I was life and health and 6 and 63, and I was working towards becoming a fee, based fee only. I went independent and I started working that whole thing out before I took my leap and started training advisors. But before then, I've had some experience, and I even was going after the 7. So that's the direction I was heading. But you've had this experience. Plus, most of the clients you work with are advisors. You help them to get their podcast up, and you really help them to get the content out that can help scale their business. But let's talk about their struggle with balance. What do you see in the industry that has been, top maybe 2 or 3 things you're like, oh yeah, advisors really struggle with fill in that blank? Like, what do they struggle with when it comes to balance, you think, Walter?
The things that I see the most, and I guess most of my perspective will be a little bit more like kind of from the media side or the marketing side of things, but I can give maybe some tangible items. One would be what to talk about. So a lot of advisors feel very comfortable talking about their subject matter, but when it comes time to actually write a blog, do a podcast, host a video, whatever the case may be, like trying to package and add structure and figure all of those different elements out, it becomes very difficult to execute. So that's kind of like one big problem is you have this wealth of knowledge, but how do I then share that knowledge? So kind of content. And we can circle back. That's like one of the areas where we try to then step in and make that part of the process a little bit easier. Two would just be the know-how, right? So like, how do I set up the microphone? I mean, you and I were talking about before we started recording today about how when you first started out, you had a mic and you had some other things, but you didn't realize it kind of wasn't the right mic at the time. And, there were different ways you could be doing it better. And you've kind of learned the hard way on some of those items. But some folks are so intimidated by the idea of a mic or, how do I even record or what's the best way to get the best sound out of X, Y, and Z, that it just prevents them from ever kind of like getting off the porch and starting that run. So I'd say kind of like the content and the technical know-how are two of the big areas where advisors really struggle. And then, the time, because it can take a lot of time to then not only do all of the front end work, but then all the back end work as well. And advisors want to be meeting with clients. They want to be, spending their time on the things that are making them money, but they realize that they do have to somewhat invest some time into producing something, having some, whether it be content or resource guide or doing a radio show or a podcast, whatever the case may be. So it's kind of like this, they struggle to find that balance of how much time can I spend in the content creation world and how much time can I spend meeting with clients and being a business owner and trying to be a marketer and all these other 800 roles and responsibilities that advisors find themselves in. Because every company is different, but what is the typical client you work with? I would imagine overlaps pretty well with a lot of the folks that we're working with, where
100%.
A lot of solo advisors, maybe one or two assistants, some smaller groups that might have 3 or 4 advisors on staff, but we're talking probably 10 or less employees for a big chunk of the folks that we're working with. But that almost makes it more daunting than if you had a 50 person business, because you're HR, you're the hiring manager, you're all those different elements, at least as you're scaling and growing. So definitely time is that one big element that I see all advisors struggle with.
Yeah. And the thing that you put in perspective that I think a lot of advisors need to hear is they tend to get all geeked out with a lot of technology. Advisors love technology, like fintech is huge. And I actually am partnered with a software company that we're building an app to help advisors be more productive.
Oh, nice.
So it's fantastic. And we're going to launch this out.
Is it going to have balance in the word?
It's going to have it. Yeah. Yeah, man. It's all about the balance. But right now, what I see a lot is like when it comes to the marketing piece, I feel like advisors really get stuck because they are the business owner. They are the HR. They are, the content creator. And when they're scaling the business, they're everything. Right. And so they get caught up in this time trap. I call it the workaholic trap in the book. But one thing they can do is they can offload, they can delegate, they can outsource. This is like the industry, like the economy of outsourcing right now. It's the gig economy, right? Where there's no excuse anymore. Like you can hire someone to do just about anything these days on a gig basis. So as we're talking about this, like that is a huge time saver. And one, I did my own podcast. I created content. I did all the recording. I did all the editing. And I did all the content creation, put it all on social media and everything. And it took a long time. That was back when I was solo. That was back when I was getting started and I had no idea what I was doing. And I got into it so deep. I'm like, oh my goodness, this is a lot of work. So then I began hiring people and I hired my teenage kids to help me. Just, can you take Audacity and splice and dice? Can you take Zoom and get the video? Like I would have them do certain portions of it to the point where like, okay, if these guys can do it, imagine what a team they can do the whole piece. And hence, the referral to Third World Media and you, Walter. And quite honestly, all I do now is I have my assistant, my operations director, basically send you guys the deliverables and you take care of everything. You edit, you format it, you put it on the podcast hosting site, you send it out to social media. I don't really worry about it once I do an interview, which is awesome. That saves me just literally dozens of hours. I do anywhere from 5 to 6 podcast recordings a week now because I can do this. And podcasting has really helped me spread the word about the book. But also it can help attract ideal clients. If you're a financial advisor, listening to the show, you might be an ideal client. That's why I've created this show and to teach about balance.
There's no hiding that, right?
Like there is no hiding. This is blatant.
Yeah.
This is on purpose. But I think other advisors who are not taking advantage of the podcast medium and who are doing it themselves, it's okay if you're doing it yourself at first because like you're gonna outsource this, but please trust us, spend the investment to get this outsourced. So tell us, Walter, how do you do this? And I kind of opened up the floodgates on that one, but how do you help advisors with the full range of services? Like how do you keep them balanced by not getting caught up in this marketing wheelhouse that really does take them away sometimes from their main focus?
Well, the first thing I tell them is to get ready for headphone hair because it's going to happen. So prepare yourself for what your hair is going to look like. And for those who your hair is really important to you and you're meeting with clients, I work out of the house and I don't see anybody all day long except every once in a while a Zoom call, but we even still do most things via phone or without, radio podcast world. I still am slow to go to the video fully. So I have to cut my hair a lot more often. So go with the earbuds is like decision number one if your hair is important to you in your appointments. So that's like priority number one. So then priority number two, no, I think it brings up an interesting kind of element to analyze is turnkey is great, right? Like just do it for me is what everybody would love to say about anything in life, right? Like, just do it for me. But at some point, then it's a template and it looks just like everybody else's does. So there is still this need for customization somewhere along the line. And that's one of the things that we've found in our business is that that's sort of the competition. How customized can I get? But can I take advantage of some turnkey processes to keep the cost reasonable, but not have it just be the exact same thing that everybody else does? Like, I guess the low hanging fruit example would be, I know there's like companies that you can use that will send, social media updates to your Facebook page, but it's all it's once a week. And then it's just a link out to like a national article with maybe a quick comment, but like, it's the exact same thing that's going to be on 1,000 other financial advisor websites or Facebook pages as an example. And you know what, to the advisor that's out there that's not doing anything, like that's maybe a great first step to take. Like that serves a purpose and serves a role. If someone's trying to take that first step, like you were kind of talking about how you began with the podcast, like, all right, well, this is going to be my first step is to have my teenager help edit this and at least, learn a little bit about the back end of it. Other people want to just jump right into the full service and that's fine too, or they want to go fully customized on something, but that's where we've tried to merge our business into figuring out where do people meet on that spectrum of customization, but finding some ways to like really turnkey things. And so one of those first solutions, kind of everything we do is driven by content. Now you're a unique situation, Travis, because you're more interview based on your show. And so your content is your guest. So there's not really anything to send you to get you ready for content other than maybe some, questions to ask, but you're a natural, great interviewer. You come up with your own great questions and formats and things along those lines. But for advisors specifically, we help take care of that first hurdle. So we provide weekly content if you're doing a radio show or monthly content if you're doing a podcast, different topics, ideas, questions, all those different elements so that you can kind of just take that whole big process of, oh my gosh, what am I going to talk about week to week off the table? It's done for you. So it's a little bit turnkey in that way that, maybe you're getting some of the same topic ideas as other financial advisors out there. But then when you're talking about it and you're speaking about it, it becomes yours. You own it at that point, and you can put your own stories, your own spin onto that. So the finished product to the end user, to your potential clients, it's going to look way different than what anybody else, has. So that's where we take that sort of turnkey part and then customize it for each individual person or client. We kind of do that at different steps of the process. We do it with hosting. So we provide to a lot of clients co-hosts. So just kind of how you and I are chatting today, we'll be the co-host on a financial advisors podcast. If they're uncomfortable with the hellos and the goodbyes and they need somebody to bounce off of, but they're a single advisor, they don't have kind of like a fellow advisor to go back and forth with, or somebody else in the office that they can make that work with, they can tap into our team of hosts with expertise to help make that easy. And almost more than anything, that co-host role, it's not so much that we're pro podcasters and have amazing voices. It's more so that they get to set an appointment on their calendar each month or every week. And we have the standard recurring appointment, and it kind of just forces them to get in the room, put the headset on and start talking and get that material out the door. Because the hardest thing, there's a reason why most of the people we work with are using us as co-hosts. And that's because they don't have the balance that you do, Travis. They don't have the ability to knock out those episodes. And so they want to be their own host. They get in, they do 2 or 3 episodes, and then they just can't make it past that. It just becomes really difficult to maintain setting up interviews, doing those interviews, even if they're not doing interviews, just finding the time to sit down, hit the record button, make sure everything's lined up properly. Like that is a big mental barrier for a lot of people. And just having something where you're on the calendar, all you have to do is connect via Zoom or some similar platform, and then everything else is taken care of from there, editing, mixing the show, posting it to your website, all of those back end parts of the process done for you, just makes it easy, because it essentially just becomes like another client on your calendar. And that's even how we talk on the shows. Like that's the interview, is we almost can be a client on the other end of the equation. Now, everyone takes on kind of its own personality. So there's shows where I'm the co-host on, where I almost play sort of like our shtick might be that I don't really know much. And so it's just sort of the personality of the show. And in fact, there's one advisor I'm thinking of specifically. He connects really well with engineers. Like I know a lot of financial advisors are like, oh no, an engineer client, but that's his bread and butter. Like he loves working.
That's his
engineers.
Fractal, right?
That's his Fractal, yeah. And so his show is like really in depth. Like we talk about, I mean, I don't know, thousands of interviews I've done with financial advisors over the last several years, and every episode almost he's talking about things I haven't even heard of before. So we even have a little special sounder that I play on his show called the Egghead Alert. So whenever he mentions a term or something that's like way out of left field, I'll hit him with the Egghead Alert, and it's like our funny little symbol that he's got to explain something more deeply because he just went way over my head on something. So we developed that personality where I'm sort of I'm the dumb guy on the show, if you will. And then we've got others where I've got an advisor, this is a radio show, but an advisor in Michigan, and he has people come in for appointments from the radio show, and they're like, "Where's Walt? I want to meet Walt. Where is he? Am I meeting with him today?" Because it almost sounds like we're both advisors on the show, because of the way we interact and have that conversation back and forth. So it's kind of like I stayed at a Holiday Inn Express kind of feeling a little bit. I play an advisor on the radio sometimes. But that's great, because that's like the dynamic that we've developed, where it feels like I'm such a local part of the show, and it sounds like we're in the same room with one another, and we chat just like we're buddies and friends, and people think we're sitting right in the same office with each other. And he kind of blows their minds when he's like, "No, I've never actually met him in person." But that's kind of the fun part of having that co-host. Not only the appointment, but your show can take on this different personality than if it's just you. But everybody's different. And that's why some people, they are better on their own. Like if somebody talks to me and they've got the chops to host their own show, I'm not afraid to tell them like, hey, save yourself some money. You don't need to record with us. As long as you can make the time commitment and hold yourself accountable to knock out shows, then you have the skill to host on your own or do your own interviews, all of those kinds of elements. So it's just trying to help people kind of find that marriage of how customized do you want to get? How much help do you need to get there? How much do we want to take advantage of these turnkey elements of the process? And that's where that's the most fun part for me, is trying to find what works for that particular advisor, because it may not be the same thing that the next person that calls that works for them, but trying to find the solution that works best for you, your level of balance, your level of skill at some of the balance things that you talk about on every episode here. To me, that's one of the most fun parts of what we do and of the job, is just finding that middle ground.
Love this. Yeah. And, it brings me back to when we first got introduced to each other. I'm like, hey, I've already done this. I've already kind of been there. And you guys are so good at saying, great, we'll throw this out. We'll throw this out. You really only need this part of, the service. quite honestly, well, I totally forgot that you guys offer the co-host option.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Because I just do interviews with with lots of guests who come on the show, but that's such an important piece. Like for me, when it comes down to being productive and time management, it's usually these standard reoccurring appointments. Like this technology that right now is called Time Lift, and my partner up in Canada, Vito, I've never met in person, but we have a standing appointment, and we're working on fine tuning this, getting it out there to advisors, wealth management firms, to help them track their productivity so they have greater balance. Like that's the whole point of the app. But if we just didn't have it on the calendar, like we'd get lost in doing other things. Yeah. Like we've got other stuff we're doing, both of us. But because it's a standard recurring appointment, it does like anchor us. Also, something you mentioned that it's a huge pet peeve of mine is advisors. Guys, sometimes you are the worst in just sharing the same old stuff. And a lot of it, quite honestly, well, Travis, you're a jerk for saying this, but it's compliance. I get it. Like compliance is tough, and depending on your broker dealer, depending on how you're set up, if you're an RIA, you have a little more freedom, which is probably a good perk to becoming an RIA. But the reality is a lot of compliance does really crack down, if you're in that tight space, but you can take it and say, hey, here's the same old, let me put my spin on it. Let me add something and get it approved or whatever. Take the content and personalize it. This is why I like what you're talking about so much, Walt, is because it's this line or this mix really between templated same stuff versus 100% customization. And it's probably somewhere in the middle where most advisors lie to getting started with their podcast, outsourcing things, and using this to help them drive home their messages for their niche. I really do believe, and I'll stand by this, like having a book, having a podcast, being able to be out in front of advisors about balance every single day sets me apart from any other coach in this space, period. Yeah. I am the balance guy. Nobody else does this. But if you want to be that for your industry, whatever your niche is, you need to get started. You need to, be doing a book, be doing a podcast, writing blogs, doing what you need to get the content out there so people can see you and that it's evergreen. So I love what you're doing. And thank you for, basically producing this entire show. You guys do an excellent job. Guys, if you're interested in getting involved with Third Wheel Media, not Third World Media, that was a joke in the pre-show, but Third Wheel Media. I know you can go to thirdwheelmedia.com. /how advisors podcast. We'll put that link down below, and you can jump on a call with Walt and get to
speaking of niche, you can even just go to howadvisorspodcast.com and it'll just take
howadvisorspodcast.com. Yep. Nailed it. Awesome. Yep. Okay, we'll put that in the show notes.
We went niche for a while and just we didn't even really promote the third wheel side, just that side.
How Advisors podcast.
Yeah.
So I really thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I know we're going to continue to talk, and we'll probably have you on the show again later on. But Walt, if you'd say like maybe one or two things right here at the end of like, hey, advisors, this is something you ought to consider to get started in the podcast realm, what would it be?
I think the biggest thing is we're entering into a world where just one solution doesn't work anymore, right? So you used to be able to just build your entire business off of a seminar, or 7, 8, 9 years ago, you could have a radio show and that was your only lead source, and that was just the only marketing that you had to really do. But we've seen over the years that just change and morph, and you have to have all these little fingers now, a little bit of a blog element, some social media presence, the podcast, and all those things I see they work really well together. It's not always driven by, okay, I have X amount of listeners to my podcast, but it's kind of like, so-and-so saw me post this on social media. That's what first got them interested and led them over to the podcast side. Or, hey, somebody came into a workshop or a seminar and then they listened. This is the biggest piece of feedback that we get about the financial advisor podcasts is they'll have a lead come from another source, but they'll listen to 20, 30, 40 episodes of the show, one after another, for those who have built up that library. And they'll consume a whole bunch of information in a short period of time. And then that helps them make that jump to be comfortable to either come in for the first appointment or go through the full planning process and become that client. And they'll point to the fact that they had that library. They got to hear how somebody teaches, how they coach, what their passion's like. And honestly, just personality. Like, that's the great thing about the podcast to me, more than even like more of a stuffy video feel, can still be good and still be fun. But like a podcast is just great to just relax, be yourself, laugh, have fun. And we encourage our folks to just tell as many stories as they can, talk about yourself, talk about where you live, what you did over the weekend, still have the educational components in there, but let your personality sort of shine through the medium. That's what people then get really connected to and really excited about when they come in to meet with you. They feel like they already know you. And so the more marketing and the more ways that you can leverage your marketing to make somebody feel like they already know you, like, that's more than half the battle. And that just really accelerates, like every show that I see that we have that's really successful. People just lean into it, that little extra amount to let their personality come out. And it just does wonders for their success. So if you want that kind of marketing, a podcast is probably a good fit for you in some way, shape, or form, to get your voice out there, get your personality out there. And we'd be happy to help. And it's great working with you, Travis. You're a shining example of somebody who puts in that little extra effort into everything that you do, but like specifically on the podcast side, and it pays dividends for you.
Well, thank you. Thank you for being on the show. Thanks for your compliments. And, this is a work in progress. We're grateful. If you love this, like, share, comment, subscribe, do all the things. Share this with an advisor who needs to hear this message today. Maybe needs to jump on and start the podcast, but really talking about it, has yet to pull the trigger. And visit Walt and their team, howadvisorspodcast.com. Thanks again, Walt, for being on the show, for your advice, and for being such an excellent guest.
It was a lot of fun. Thanks, Travis.